This is How Not to Fuck Up Your 20s. My name is Daniel, and my goal for this podcast is to encourage people to take more meaningful risks and to hopefully fail in more meaningful ways through their 20s. This podcast is about good value, and this more or less starts with me being a mechanic. And I did 3 years of automotive classes when I was in high school that counted towards credits for any type of trade schools, and then I went off and did a few years working on attack helicopters, and now I'm working on electronic buses. But about midway through that entire chain of events, I was working on this girl's car, and we were going to take this car on a trip, and we were going to go up in the mountains of Idaho and go visit, I can't remember what camping spot. And so I decided, okay, we'll tune up your car, get it going good. I'm a mechanic. I know what I'm doing. We'll change out the spark plugs. You haven't done that yet since you bought this, and it's been 3 years. We'll do this, that, and the other. Throw in a new air filter and a couple different things and get it tuned up real nice. So we go to the store and buy new spark plugs. And I decided that I'm going to buy the cheaper spark plugs because, I save $5. That gets you a drink or two. And as soon as I finish this job, the engine starts running terribly. I'm like, oh my goodness, I've just ruined this engine. What has happened? What have I hit? What air filter or what vacuum tube have I hit that's making this run wrong? It can't. I just switched out the spark plugs. It can't be that. The air filter is good, so it can't be that. Maybe the mass airflow, all these different things. Maybe the exhaust isn't going so good because that's starting to get cut out, and maybe that exhaust is with that hole in it before the catalytic converter is probably not good, and maybe that's what's doing it to this engine. Anyways, I sit there and work on it for a few days, and I'm trying to here and there trying to figure it out while I have time in between her job that she's working, and I can't figure it out. So we go on this trip, and there's this huge hill called Horseshoe Bend that we have to go up and back down. And on our way up, we have to stop the car because it's chugging so hard that it can barely make it up this hill. Really not good situation to be in, and we're out there about to go on an adventure into the middle of nowhere. And yeah, that was not good. Anyways, we make it, we get there, everything's fine. It chugs back up the hill. We stop on the way again to let it cool off, and then we get going again. So when we get back, I pull out the OBD2, and I discover that there is a knock inside the engine. So one of these pistons is not firing like it should. And I'm like, okay, what is going on? So I check all the wires to it. I make sure that the connection to the spark plug is good. I make sure everything's actually been connected. I make sure that nothing's been broken. And then finally, it's still not going well. And finally, I decide to switch the spark plug's placement, and the knock moves to the other piston. And so what had happened is that I had purchased a faulty spark plug. And all I saved was $5, but I got a massive headache. So if you don't have the money to fix it right the first time, you don't have the money to fix it right the second time. So don't always buy the cheapest option because it's not always of value. That's the easiest way to say that, and that's the truth of it, is that oftentimes the cheap option might only save you a little bit of money, but it ends up costing you a lot more than that. And I know through most people's 20s, they're broke, they don't have a lot of money, there's always penny pinching, especially when you're at university, and trying to get the most out of everything, and you can definitely do that on a budget, but just know that sometimes you shouldn't go for the cheapest option, especially when it's important. Here's an example of some of the reasons why buying a more expensive item also can be semi-justified if you can afford it and it's not a financial drain. I'm trying to figure out the right context on how to say this, but I'll do the story and then you'll kind of see what I mean. So I got into watches around 2016, I want to say. And I got really into watches, really into trying to dress nice and trying to figure out who I was. And I had this watch that I had my eye on that cost $400. Now, a $30 watch will also tell you the time. But this watch was nice. It had a leather strap. It had the motion. So as you were walking, the springs wound themselves. And I can't even remember what that's called anymore. It had open gears. It looked really nice. And this was it was a very nice watch. And I bought this watch for $400. I owned this watch for about 4 years. And then I decided that I needed to sell it. I was in Helsinki. I didn't have any money because things had gotten stretched out for visas and everything. And so I needed some money for it. So I listed this watch. I sold it for about 300 euros, which dollars to euros, they're almost the same. So all in all, over this 4-year period of time, it only cost me $2 a month to wear this expensive and nice watch. And I was still able to sell it for 300 euros, which is fantastic. And then that was a little good chunk of money that I was able to spend on living in Europe. And so this is one of the reasons I would say it's almost, but it has to be something that actually holds value and has value for this to work. Laptops will not hold value. Gaming computers will not hold value. Your cell phones will not hold value. Electronics do not hold value. But things that are collector's items and nice, they can do things like this. And so sometimes by buying more expensive items, you're able to pay less in the long run for the same thing and have a higher quality over that long haul by simply taking care of the items that you have, having high quality items, and then deciding what you want to do with them because they're still valuable to other people at the end of it. I'm going to let you take what you want from that. It might just seem like I'm bragging about having a very expensive watch here, but it was very different than if I would have gone out and bought a $50 watch, which or an $80 or $90 watch, which I believe Daniel Wellington, I had one at one point. And that's about the price range they are. And they have almost no resale value of any kind, but they still give you the time. So it kind of depends on which way you want to go for it. There's also value in the inexpensive that cost $10 and last for 4 years. So let's talk about the 3 things that I'm going to recommend that you don't skimp on at all. You spend the money and you get something that's actually nice. And these 3 things are your shoes, because you're going to be walking in them all day, your clothes, because you're going to be wearing them all day, and your bed, because when you're not in your shoes or your clothes, you're going to be in your bed. And so those are the 3 things that you should not skimp on, because those are going to drastically improve the quality of life that you have as you go around. Because if you have bad shoes, they're going to hurt your feet, and nobody likes their feet aching. Clothes that fit you and work with you nice and work with the environment that you're in, and portray who you are and what you want to be and things like that. And then your bed, of course, because you sleep in it, and if you have a bed that hurts your back, it's not fun, because that means that you're going to be waking up every morning wondering why you haven't bought a new bed. And now with the 3 things not to skimp on, let's go into the 3 things that are very much so worth going into debt for. And this is not an all-inclusive. Everyone's situation is a little bit different, but usually if you stick to these 3, you're going to be doing much better than 95% of people. So number 1 is an education. Nobody can take your education from you once you have it. Unfortunately, inside the United States, if you go into a bunch of debt and then your education doesn't mean anything, then you can't file for bankruptcy and get rid of your student loan debt. But nobody can take that education away from you. Whereas if you have a home and they can foreclose on your home, you have a car, they can take away your car. The second one is a home. Homes are kind of a terrible investment because oftentimes that's the largest way that people save money is by putting money into their home. And by no means will you be getting that money out of your home ever again, and your home costs a lot of money to upkeep, but it is a savings engine that has worked for a lot of people over the past 50 years. That could totally change, but the fact that you are now no longer paying rent to somebody else, and then you're kind of like that money is going towards you and something for you, can be better. Also, be very wary, because if you buy a home, you are now stuck to that place. And there's something good about, in your 20s, renting and being able to just decide you want to move across country and find a job over there, or follow and sell everything and go travel the world, anything like that. And if you have a home, it makes it a lot more difficult. The third thing that's kind of worth going into debt for is a car that will get you to and from work. Not an extravagant one. All of these three things are something that should be like within your means. Don't go all sorts of crazy and get this crazy education that costs you $200,000 if you aren't loaded already. Don't buy a massive home if you're not ready to have a massive home. Don't buy a sports car because they're going to depreciate in value unless you are like 50 and have the money to just throw at a classic car that will then go up in value. That's the only exception. But most of us in our 20s aren't going to have that type of money or knowledge or money to just throw around. So I really hope that throughout this I've kind of talked about how to maybe change the way that you view what you're spending on a little bit more. And I want to always encourage people to go out there and spend more money on experiences rather than things, and learning things and doing things and going places and making memories with people is often more valuable than just spending money on things. And yeah, anyways, I hope that you kind of grasp what I'm trying to get at here, that value is often cheaper, but cheap is rarely of value. And it can be tough to do sometimes when you're 20s. So I hope that this has hopefully helped somebody kind of like see something a little bit differently. You can kind of see, and this also kind of goes into what I'm going to talk about in the next podcast, and that is taking care of things that need to be taken care of today, like a leaking faucet. You don't want to let the leaking faucet run and destroy the floor, because the more water in there, the worse it's going to be. And just by spending a little bit of effort, even if you're tired, burnt out, whatever it is, to make sure that that doesn't drip into the floor all night, and get somebody to come and fix it right now and pay them right now, because fixing a leaking sink is a lot less expensive than replacing a floor. And so that's what the next one's going to be about. But I hope that this has helped somebody out. Thank you for listening, and join us for the next one. So this has been How Not to Fuck Up Your 20s. Thank you for rating and subscribing or whatever you do on this. My name is Daniel, and take care.